lamenting that nutritional assistance was lapsing and was interrupted. Then, in the very same press conference, they vowed against ending the shutdown. How can you have
This is Lauren Burke. This is the House Rules Committee deciding how the debate is going to go tomorrow on the House floor with regard to the deal to end the shutdown going from the Senate side to the House side. The Rules Committee decides what exactly is going to be voted on and whether or not there will be any amendments to that legislation. It's highly unlikely that there will be, because the Democrats simply do not have the votes to change what was sent from the Senate side to the House side. As many of you may have seen in the media, there's been a major controversy over the fact that 8 Democrats joined with the Republican majority in the Senate to end the shutdown without a deal on health care. The Republicans, of course, led by Donald Trump, have cut health care and are looking to, quite frankly, dismantle and effectively destroy the Affordable Care Act. And of course, that won't hit home for millions of people until January 2026. But right now, it's open season for Affordable Care Act policies, and people are finding out what the new rates will be for 2026. But again, this is the Rules Committee. I'm just going to carry this for a little bit and talk a little later after it's over. It should be ending. It'll probably actually go on for quite a while. But I'm going to take it live for a little bit here. You're going to hear a ton of rhetoric, quite frankly, political rhetoric from the Republicans about healthcare policy. They really have no, frankly, they have no healthcare policy. Their healthcare policy is to end whatever Barack Obama did in 2010 with regard to the Affordable Care Act. Of course, they're not going to say it that way, but effectively, that is what their policy is on the Republican side. If you can find a Republican member of the U.S. House that has a healthcare plan, please let me know what that is. This is Lauren Burke. This is Lauren Live, and I was a congressional staffer once for the U.S. House and on the U.S. Senate side as well. I've worked for 4 members of Congress and worked in big media. And working for big media, you learn a lot about the dynamics of how these stories are portrayed. At any rate, the members are going to talk both on the right and the left, Republican, Democrat. I'm going to turn up the sound. I'm going to leave it going for a while, and I'll be back in and out every now and then.
And throughout the budget year. But this shutdown was about one thing. It was about power. It was about Chuck Schumer and Democratic leaders trying to hold a government hostage for their own ambitions, to satisfy their angry mob that wants them to come back with a pound of flesh from President Trump. If Democrats want to let their angry fringe burn their party down, that's their choice. But we are not going to let them hurt the American people any longer in this process. We are not going to let them hold anyone hostage in the name of political chaos. And I want to thank senators on both sides of the aisle to coming to their senses and working together. And I specifically want to mention Senator Fetterman, who has said from the very beginning that you can support the healthcare policy efforts that many in this room are talking about tonight. But you could also do what's right and fund the government and take care of the people, which we swore an oath to do. He was the most plainly spoken, honest broker on the Senate side. And that's what courage looks like. So as we take up this measure here in the Rules Committee today and the House tomorrow night, we're doing what should have been done weeks ago. We're restoring order. We're reopening government. And we're putting the country first, because that's what the American people expect and they deserve. To the veterans who have waited for benefits, to the workers who have missed paychecks, to the families who have worried about how to make ends meet, this should have never happened to you. You deserve better from your government, and politics disguised as principle. So today we will act, and tomorrow we will finish the job. We will bring this shutdown to an end once and for all, and we will send a message loud and clear that governing is not performance, it's a responsibility. because this was never a shutdown of the government. This was a shutdown of common sense. And I yield back, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Langworthy. Ms. Leisure Fernandez, you're recognized.
Well, thank you so very much, Madam Chair. And it's so good to see everybody. Bienvenidos hace tanto tiempo. It has just been way too long, right? But it's been so long that, following up on my colleague, and I will now say friend, Representative Langworthy's comments about what is this about, let's remember how we got here. Because it has really not been that long for the American people, because we were here. Remember, in the middle of the night, just 5 months ago, while Republicans were jamming through a bill that caused a health care crisis. And now we're here because they refuse to solve a major part of that health care crisis, which is those enhanced premium tax credits that are rising, and they're doing it now. The reason we needed to act and act now is because people open those bills, they open those notices, and their premiums are going up. I mean, anybody watching, I don't know why people watch rules, but people do watch rules. Raise your hand if you are seeing your healthcare premiums go up, because everywhere I go, people are seeing their healthcare premiums go up. And it's not just because they're letting them expire, it's what you did back in the dead of night, where you rushed through. We had to rush to make sure you gave those billionaire tax credits that are permanent. Those are permanent tax credits, which we had to pass before July 4th, but you couldn't bother to extend the tax credits for working families and businesses before the end of December. And you did it all by raising the deficit. Mr. Roy has passed, he's always talked about that darn deficit, $4 trillion. $4 trillion. You raised our, not just our healthcare costs, or everything, right? Insurance premiums, groceries, utilities, everything's going up. And you know what's interesting is that those tax credits that Democrats are fighting for are especially important for folks who live in rural and Republican held districts. And it's not just Marjorie Taylor Greene's adult kids that will see their health care premiums double. It's across everybody's district. Nearly 6 in 10 marketplace enrollees, people who benefit from these tax credits, live in congressional districts represented by Republicans. Chairman Cole, do you know how many folks in your district will see their premiums?
I think I've been educated about that tonight, actually.
And do you remember what it was?
It was about 48,000.
48,000. But you know what's interesting is your House State's Insurance Commissioner actually thinks that 100,000 Oklahomans could no longer afford health insurance by the end of the year. I'm sure you know Glenn Mulready.
Mulready.
Glenn Mulready. You know what he said?
Mulready.
Mulready. So Glenn Mulready, your insurance commissioner, said he tried to talk to his delegation about how it's not a great idea to have these all just disappear, but maybe do it more gradually or do something. He said, I like this quote. He said, they weren't listening at that time, though. Did you talk to the commissioner?
I have not talked to him about this. We actually talk pretty frequently.
Okay.
He
well,
calls at least once a year to every member of the
Once a year.
delegation. Again, I know
yeah,
him
once a
quite
year.
well.
What's interesting is right now we're in this moment where once a year is not enough because those healthcare premiums are going up. The president of the Oklahoma Hospital Association, he thinks it's even worse when you take into account everything. He said 300,000 Oklahomans will be affected. This is his quote. It's been a long time since we've seen individuals faced with the real challenge of deciding whether or not to take advantage of health insurance for themselves, their families, or go bare. And that's a close quote. And that's the thing about this. These are not just in Democrat districts. And what I love is that we are fighting because we don't care whether you're in a Democrat district or Republican district. What we care about is health insurance. And that's what this fight has proven, is that we care about whether or not you're going to be able to afford your health insurance. And you know what? When Representative Roy was talking about being a
I
cancer
wish you
survivor.
cared not as
But-
much about whether or not my people get paid.
What?
You know,
Right.
whether or not the people that are working at Tinker Air
Right,
Force
Mr.
Base, I
Mr.
wish you
Chairman, I
cared
really
about them
respect you,
getting
but I didn't ask you a
paid.
question, Madam Chairwoman. I didn't ask
I
you a question.
apologize, but
Thank you.
you
So-
were talking about my district, so
Yeah.
I thought I would
Well,
express
I-
myself about my
yeah.
district and
But
what they
we've
think.
heard, we've heard you talk about that before, and I have 30,000 people in New Mexico who are federal employees, and I've been meeting with them as well. But I wanted to go to the fact that, you know, Representative Roy, who came and left so quickly, he was talking about cancer and how he's a cancer survivor. I'm a cancer survivor. And he was talking about how the Affordable Care Act is so bad, but you know what? I'm a cancer survivor. And so if it wouldn't have been for the Affordable Care Act, I would not be able to get insurance. Because it was a
It's amazing how, once you start talking about the Republican members' districts and the constituents who are going to either lose their health care because they can't pay for it or be priced out or pay higher premiums, all of a sudden people get very touchy. That was quite interesting.
makes sense. But what we also need to make it be is affordable. And we had a hearing. I'm the chair of the Democratic Women's Caucus, together with members of the Policy and Steering Committee. We had a hearing. Well, Republicans were on vacation. Well, Republicans were gone. If you don't want to call it vacation, let's be honest, you were not here. But we were. And we held a hearing. And one of the most compelling voices, I mean, they were all compelling. We actually had to take out our tissue because we were crying so much. But one of those voices was Brick from Utah. Brick from Utah, who has a condition that he needs infusions. And the only way he can afford those infusions is because he gets those tax credits. And he said, I want to work. And he went and talked to his representatives, and he tried to meet with his senators. And he did get to talk to Representative Kennedy, and Representative Kennedy's answer to him was, well, just go on disability. That's not an answer. That doesn't save the American government anything at all, because he wants to work. But you know what? We're going to have an amendment from Leader Jeffries and Whip Clark, I see her here, that's going to have a 3-year extension. And I'm supposing you wouldn't support that amendment. Is that right, Mr.
I don't
Chairman?
have a vote on that amendment unless you get it out of here, so.
Right.
Uh,
But we could vote, and we will vote later, on a 1-year extension, right? Just a 1-year extension, because we've heard the ranking member talk over and over again about that there are Republicans who want that 1-year extension. So we could do that as an amendment. I'll offer that as well. It's 14 of her colleagues. Do you know, what would a 1-year extension cost us, Chairman Cole?
I have no idea. We have no
Ranking
jurisdiction.
member-
This is not,
ranking member, what would it
with all
cost?
due
This is about
respect,
23.
can I finish my answer?
Sure,
With all due
sure.
respect, we don't deal with this on Appropriations Committee. This is not our jurisdiction, it's not our issue. That's part of the problem here. You're trying to raise it on appropriations bills. This is a Ways and Means or an Energy and Commerce issue. It's not ours. And so to hold up the funding of the entire government over something that belongs in another committee, not ours, and you're basically holding our bills, not you, and frankly, not the House, and not even a majority of the Senate. But our bills have been held hostage over something we have no jurisdiction
Thank
over.
you, Chairman Cole. You made that point earlier, but as we were here before, when you all passed it, this bill has tons of stuff that's not appropriations. And ranking member, I've heard it's about $23 billion for 1 year. That's about what it costs for 1 year. Is that right?
For 1 year, but it was 1 year.
I've asked ranking member, sir.
And setting up a bipartisan commission, a bipartisan, to look into this and to address the issues that people may have some concern about. But a 1-year extension, give some relief to the people who are out there. And I quoted Connecticut, you quote your district, and we can quote everyone's district and what's happening to people out there today. And the notion that we can't take this up because the continuing resolution is what the Appropriations Committee does. And we've got 50 pages of this document that deals with healthcare. If there were the willingness, the political will to solve this, we could do it, and we could do it very, very quickly. And let's not bifurcate continuing resolution to appropriations bills. It is all of one package. And it is incredible to me that we would watch people suffer everywhere to see what's going on with their rising healthcare prices, or their kids that are not going to be able to get the treatment that they need, and that just say, hey, figure it out another way. No, that's not what we're about. And that really is what is so outrageous about the conversation and what is going on. Go ahead.
So Ranking Member, I think that you're right on point. It's like, we can do this because we do it all the
Yes.
time. This bill is full of things, and we'll get to that whole idea of the payola for those senators in a
Whoa.
moment, right? But I'm also struck by the contrast of priorities. The contrast of priorities. Democrats have been talking about the need to address healthcare, and it's not just since the shutdown. It was in that big, beautifully bad bill of theirs. Healthcare was key, and they could fix it now. But it's the priorities. $40 billion, I would think that's what is proposed to be sent down to Argentina. Chairman
Yes.
Cole, is that,
Right.
do you recall that?
No, I don't.
It's $40 billion.
$40
right?
billion.
$40 billion. So that seems to be a priority. They will send $40 billion to Argentina instead of spending $23 billion to provide health care to Americans. And all we're getting is a pinky promise that they will address that, but they won't even support a 1-year extension, a 3-year extension, or a permanent extension. But let's get to the stuff that's not. Let's get to the stuff that is not probably appropriation, but what has been stuck in this bill that would provide those senators. It's like a payola. Like, what kind of bribe is that? Who gets 500,000 of violations? And that's why we're saying it's maybe $8 million. Senators are gonna get $1 million, a couple of million, $500,000, and we're not gonna give money to help a father pay for his health care? Is that what's going on here, Ranking Member?
Speaking of what doesn't belong in an appropriations bill, this doesn't belong in an appropriations bill. It's really, we have a review by an ethics committee that says that they can be paid off. We had it's just outrageous what's happened here. But in terms of the process, where it so violates what appropriations has done, it normally is the process where you get the 4 people involved that are the chairs and ranking members in the House and Senate, and you have a sign-off on the bills. First of all, that did not happen this time as well, and my Republican colleagues, or no, the Senate, the Senate chair, they just went forward and posted the bills without having sign-off. Then this is secretly put it in the bill at the last hour with no one, including the House chair or ranking member, or I don't believe the ranking member on the Senate side. This was a sweetheart deal that was put in there that rips off the government and the people of this country.
And Americans think that the system is stacked against them.
And
And
it
when
is.
Republicans support giving payouts to senators in the millions of dollars, they can see why. But I'm going to give my Republican colleagues on this committee the opportunity to say this is not right. I will be offering an amendment to strip that entire section from the bill. We'll see what kind of courage the Republicans on this dais have. Now, I am the last Democrat to be able to ask questions. So I wanted to just give the ranking member an opportunity to see if there was anything else she wanted to raise in response to some of the other
Right.
issues
No,
that.
I thank the gentleman very much. It's really been really incredible. And first of all, everybody here is supportive of our veterans and so forth. And if we really wanted to do something about taking care of our veterans and their health care, we would have, and you would have, dealt with the $51.7 billion in advance funding for our veterans through the Toxic Exposure Fund, which was done, by the way, in the Fiscal Responsibility Act several years ago, which we've done, and the ranking member of Milcon VA is here. And yet there is advance money, for medical care, but for the Toxic Exposure Fund, the answer is no. Why? You want to help veterans? This leads to me, when I see that there's no commitment on the Toxic Exposure Fund. And what we do and what we have done in the past, it really is, we have done advanced funding over the years. And we did, and as I mentioned earlier in my comments, Ranking Member Wasserman Schultz, Chair Judge Carter, a full day of negotiations. Quite frankly, it was one of the bright shining spots of bipartisanship we had in going through the appropriations process, but that has been left out of this bill. Do you really care about veterans? Let's make sure they're taken care of, because they get caught in the crosshairs of this madness that we are currently involved in. I would also like to just say that I'm really tired and, quite honestly, fed up. It is a lie. It is misinformation that we had to reopen the government in order for there to be SNAP benefits to go to families. $6 billion in a contingency fund, which we voted for. Read the bill, understand what you did in the bill, and know what you did. You passed it. And it was the president who decided he did not want to spend that money to feed people. He's taken it all the way to the Supreme Court to deprive people and kids. It's 16 million kids. It's 8 million seniors. It's 4 million people who are disabled and 1.2 million veterans. You want to care for your veterans? Care for your veterans? Make sure that money in that contingency fund is outflowing tonight and going, and not let them claw back, telling states, get the money back that you have given out. What is wrong with this picture? And I just say, if Mr. Roy were here, I would tell him, which he needs to understand. He needs to understand. He talked about a buyout. The buyouts were offered using money that government simply did not have. They signed contracts, buyouts with money that the Congress had not yet appropriated. That is unlawful. There is a lawlessness about this administration, and particularly where it affects the Appropriations Committee. They have been doing it from day one. And I love being on the Appropriations Committee as chair, as ranking member, and by God, I'm not going to give up one single bit of power that the Appropriations Committee has in order to be able to carry out our mission. And that is the $1.7 trillion that we deal with every single year for the services that the American people depend on. That's what we should be doing. And the power of the purse. Talk about a clean bill? No clean bill. They took back $410 billion from that earlier budget, and nothing is said about allowing them to continue to get away with this. An unelected bureaucrat, Russ Vought, who has the power to take that money away, which Tom Cole and myself and the other appropriators said we were going to pass because it makes a difference to our constituents. It is really unbelievable lawlessness that has been pervasive since January here. And that's something that we ought to really take back for the Appropriations Committee, but for the good of the American people. And the healthcare piece is absolutely the center of what this shutdown, yes, has been about, because that is a priority and it needs to be. Why? The last point I will make to you is why now? Why now? Because the enrollment period is underway. It started November 1st. Why now? Is because everybody's got the letter in their hand saying $2,000 a month, my insurance is going up. I can't afford $24,000 a year. Why now? Because by December 15th, they must make the first payment so that they can have health care insurance on January 1st. That's what we are fighting for. And I'll continue to fight that battle every step of the way, despite what the United States Senate did yesterday.
Thank you very much, Ranking Member, and thank you for allowing me to ask that last question. And it is indeed a contrast in priorities, prioritizing ballrooms and your bathroom, and whether you have marble or gilded gold, or providing the food
Food and
that people
healthcare.
need.
Food and
holding
healthcare.
to not distribute the money that Congress already sent over. And we should have had every Republican yelling at the White House to release those funds, and I did not hear them.
This
And
is
I don't
true
know,
colors
Chairman,
coming
I
out.
don't know, Chairman,
Food
if you
and
went,
healthcare.
if you went to your food bags, but we did, and it wasn't performative, Mr. Langworthy. It was because people are hungry, and that money was there, and Trump refused to release it. And that is a disgrace. It is immoral. It is against every principle of faith and clarity that I have ever learned. And with that,
Thank you,
Chair,
Ms.
I
Leisure
yield back.
Fernandez. Mr. Scott, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I too intend to talk about the Senate provision that they put in last night. I found out about it sometime around 9 o'clock. And I'll just be honest with you, Mr. Cole, I represent a lot of people that work for the federal government, Robins Air Force Base, Moody Air Force Base, USDA, I could go down the list. And I was very excited about coming back to Washington, D.C. to vote to open the government back up. And then when I saw what the Senate did last night, I'll be honest, I had a hard night. And I've been struggling with what the right vote is because of what the Senate did.
Wow.
And I want to just tell you, because I want the American citizens to be able to read it. You can start at page 217 of the legislation where it says requiring Senate notification for disclosure of Senate data. And there's a lot of with respect to's and other things in the first pages. But when you get over to page 223, you'll see where they've created a private cause of action. Specifically for them. And it goes on and it says that cause of action, and this is on page 224, any senator whose Senate data or the Senate data of whose Senate office has been acquired, subpoenaed, searched, accessed, or disclosed in violation of this section may bring a civil action against the United States if the violation was committed by an officer, employer, or agent of the United States or of any federal department of agent or agency. Relief. If senator prevails on a claim under this subsection, the court shall, not may, shall award for each instance of a violation of this section the greater of, not the lesser of, the greater of statutory damages of $500,000 or the amount of actual damages, reasonable attorney fees, cost of litigation. And it goes on from there. Now, there's other language in here, waiver of sovereign immunity, no qualified immunity. And there's other language in here too that indicates that each line would be an additional payment. And so most of us as members have a campaign phone, a campaign email, a personal phone, a personal email, and then a business phone and a business email. That's 6 violations the way they count it. If they went for all of them, 6, minimum of $500,000 apiece. Now, I don't think, and I've been asking questions on this since last night, and I'm gonna tell you, I don't think that Senate leadership shared with the leadership of the House what they were doing. Now, I want the Democrats to know this. My understanding is that Chuck Schumer was very much aware and signed off on this particular language as well. So just, y'all might want to ask questions about that. I'm just telling the truth on, this is, as soon as I found out about it, I started asking questions. But they're saying, well, the executive branch shouldn't be checking up on the legislative branch. Well, there's some truth to that. There's a lot of truth to it. I believe in the separation of powers. And they talk about it being good governance. The thing that I can't get past, though, and this is, again, I mean, for the American citizens, if you go to page 227 of the bill, limited retroactive applicability. In general, the amendments made by this section shall apply to any acquisition, subpoena, search, accessing, disclosure of Senate data as defined in Section 10A of the Legislative Branch Appropriations Act 2005, and to any failure to disclose such an acquisition, subpoena, search, accessing, or disclosure occurring on or after January 1 of 2022. So it's given them the ability to retroactively go back. We know, you literally know who, at least, we may not know all of them, but we at least know the list of some of them. In this paragraph, the term violation section 10 is the meaning given to the violation section. It goes on from there. But there's also language in there where it indicates that each account is a separate payment. Now, this language did not go through any committee markup. This language was not shared with the House of Representatives prior to it being put in the bill. And I personally agree that it should be removed. The problem is if we remove it, the Senate, it has to go back to the Senate. And then you're right back to where you were 40 days ago, where all of a sudden you're trying to get a piece of legislation out of the Senate. And so, I mean, I've struggled. I want you to know that, Mr. Cole. I want the American citizen. I've struggled with what the right course of action here is, because what they did is wrong. This should not be in this piece of legislation. And they can say it's about good governance all they want to. When they made it retroactive, then all of a sudden it was no longer about good governance. There's actually a list of people that know they will get paid as soon as this thing is signed. At least they've got the coupon where all they have to do is go file at the courthouse and get paid. And I haven't decided exactly what I'm going to do. My gut is, because of the way this place is so dysfunctional now, that the right thing to do is to get the government cut on as soon as possible and make sure that the American citizens are watching what those senators do and hold them to account for what they did. And at the same time, the House put legislation out that actually reverses what the Senate has done. They should vote on this in the light of day. If they think this is the right thing to do, then they should have a committee meeting and a straight up or down vote on it. Don't hold my people who work in my district at Robins Air Force Base paycheck any longer than it's already been held. And so I want you to know, Mr. Cole, you're our chair. I respect you tremendously, as much as I respect anybody in this house, and as much as, I mean, I can take everybody I ever met. I have tremendous respect for you. You are a man of integrity and honesty. And when you tell me you didn't know, I trust you. And when Mike Johnson, when I'm asking questions about it at 9 o'clock last night, I don't think our side knows. I think the Dems and the Republicans in the Senate knew, though. I do. I want you to know that. And but this is, I mean, American citizens just need to read it and they can figure it out for themselves. It's not that hard. It's big letters. It starts on 217. It ends on 228. It won't take you 10 minutes to read it, and you really can pretty much start where the private cause of action is discussed. But that would never pass if that was a standalone piece of legislation, and it is clearly authorizing an appropriations act.
Would the gentleman yield?
I'll be happy to yield.
Yeah, I just want to add that I share the concerns of the gentleman from Georgia. I do not think that this provision should have been inserted. It certainly shouldn't have been inserted at the 11th hour without deliberation and back and forth. I do believe the gentleman's correct. There were Democrats and Republicans involved with it. But I think there's going to be a lot of people, if they look and understand this, are going to see it as self-serving, self-dealing kind of stuff. And I don't think that's right. And I understand, I think some of the motivations were to try to target a DOJ that I think was fairly obviously abusing its authority and targeting United States senators, separation of powers concerns, all the things. We can debate all that. But, we think it was pretty egregious. So I have no problem with the prospect of going after and trying to empower, even through private right of action, a way to go, because we do it in other contexts, consent decrees and other things, but the retroactive, potential to have dollars going to United States senators, when we've got American citizens, whether it was J6ers, whether it's people from the FACE Act, whether it was others that have also had the full force of the federal government through the Department of Justice targeting and coming down on them, and they're going to see, oh, but you can slide in a provision in here for United States senators? Like, it is beside my comprehension that this got put in the bill. And it's why people have such a low opinion of this town. I am torn also, the gentleman from Georgia, because we need to fund the government and we need to get this passed. And I'm trying to figure out what we can do to force the Senate's hand to say you're going to repeal this provision and fix it without amending it here to then delay the funding of government, which we want to proceed to go move forward with. But that provision needs to get fixed. And we need to find a way as a body to get it fixed as soon as possible. And I'm continuing explore the options tonight. I yield back to the gentleman from Georgia.
Mr.
Thank you,
Scott,
and
would you yield?
I just want to point out it's $500,000, and the way it's written, it is a minimum of $500,000. It is per line. It is and Ms. Ledger Hernandez, I'll give you 60 seconds, but I think it's time. I think it's time to move on. I just don't. other
I
members want to
truly
speak as well.
appreciate your very careful consideration and review for the American people of this. As you know, I do have an amendment to strike the whole thing. And I think it would send a great message if you would actually say, I'm going to vote for this amendment.
Well,
Allow
see,
it.
and this is why I didn't
but-
want to get
yeah.
into this debate. The problem is, if we could take it out and send it to the Senate and know that the gamesmanship wasn't going to be played over there and the government would get cut back on, I'd be glad to. But the bottom line is, if we amend this bill with anything at all, we risk extending the shutdown, air traffic controllers not being paid, law enforcement not being paid, our staffs here not being paid. And that's a risk that I don't trust.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying I don't trust just the Democrats. I don't trust the system to work where we could fix it with what probably a supermajority of this committee thinks should be done and not delay the government coming back on. And with
So
that,
the other, I would only point out that it's not, if you would, I just wanted to finish. Will you give me 15 seconds?
Yes.
So it says each
4.
violation, and so the violation isn't just each telephone, it's each time it's requested. So it could multiply much higher than that because it's by
That is my read as
violation.
well. That is
Yeah.
my read as well.
Yeah, we agree on that.
Thank
Madam
you.
Chair? Madam Chair? I just want to state for the record, it's another reason why the House and the Senate should be in session during a shutdown. Maybe this could have been avoided.
Thank you, Mr. McGovern. Thank you, Mr. Scott. Mr. Griffith, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I too am very concerned about those sections. I will tell you, I've already made the decision that I will vote for this bill and not vote for any amendments because shutdown needs to end. It's been going on too long. Too many of my people are hurting.
So what that was about is a provision in the bill that pays out a bunch of Republicans who have a grievance with the Justice Department, $500,000 per phone line for some complaint that they've gotten. The bottom line of it is that these Republicans who are complaining about that provision, Austin Scott and Chip Roy, are probably going to vote for the bill anyway. I mean, this entire conversation is leading in the same direction, which is they're going to probably vote for the bill anyway. This is Morgan Griffith talking from Virginia. He's definitely going to vote for the bill. It could be anything in there. He'd vote for the bill. He is going to vote for the bill. He is going to do whatever Donald Trump tells him to do, as is Chip Roy. Austin Scott is the only one in that discussion who might, be a thing. But again, he started that conversation talking about how folks in his district are losing their paychecks, et cetera, and so on. And I'm sure he's hearing from them. So anyway, that provision in the bill is crazy and sleazy, and I'm sure it'll pass because this administration has no ethics, it's completely corrupt, and this is all about moving money from government bank accounts to the bank accounts of private friends of the administration. That's just what they're doing.
But they create programs that never authorized by the authorized committees. And you're absolutely right. When it comes to the premium enhanced tax credits or the enhanced premium tax credits, that's the jurisdiction of Energy and Commerce, Ways and Means, and Ed and Workforce. They overlap. Different pieces of it belong to each of those. And of course, the bill that they keep talking about, that they claim took all this money away, that came out of the Budget Committee. That didn't come out of appropriations either, the reconciliation bill. And I just appreciate that you're recognizing that's not the proper jurisdiction. And before we had the shutdown, I wrote a whole column on how we could reach some kind of an agreement on a glide path. But I also pointed out in several, and I've had several columns where I've talked about this. I do a weekly column, that we have 20% on the enhanced premium tax credits. We have what is pretty darn clear, 20% shadow enrollees. Now, if you will bear with me, Mr. Chairman, tell me if you disagree with this. What we see is normally in an insurance plan, you have 15% of the enrollees don't use their insurance in a given year. That's been for decades, and some years it may go up 0.2 or down 0.2, but it ran around that 15%. With the enhanced premium tax credits, we see 35% not using it. And here's what I believe is happening, and I think most experts agree with this. You tell me if you have any disagreement. Jump in, Mr. Chairman, and tell me if you disagree. What happened, because it was an emergency piece of legislation during COVID, because they wanted to help people that were having a hard time, they didn't put in all the checks and balances. So you don't have to re-enroll. It's an automatic re-enrollment because it was only going to be a 5-year program. And what could happen, and the theory I use and the example, the hypothetical I always use is, if you live in North Florida and you happen to go to a grocery store or a mall and you get enrolled, and then 6 months, 8 months, 9 months later, you move to South Georgia and you go to the mall or the grocery store and you get enrolled, most citizens of the United States would think, well, I'm enrolled now in Georgia, so they've canceled my program in Florida. But that's not happening with the enhanced premium tax credits. And my frustration with this argument for the last 40 days has been, open up the government and we can figure this out, because as the Health Subcommittee Chair on Energy and Commerce, I don't want us to continue to waste 20% of our money that we're spending. It's billions of dollars. I don't want to continue to waste 20% of that money that doesn't go to help a single enrollee. It goes to the insurance companies, and they're getting the money. They don't know whether the people really exist or not either, because there's no way to check, and it keeps rolling on. If we do a 3-year extension without some way to check, or a 1-year extension, which our colleagues on the other side of the aisle have recommended to us, either a 1-year or a 3-year extension, we're going to continue that 20% waste. We're going to waste the taxpayer dollars. That doesn't mean I don't want to help people who are trying to struggle. And even for some of those, Kaiser Family Foundation estimates that 10% of the people are receiving these benefits are over the 400% poverty level, which means they're making $106,000 a year. And maybe in some of the rich districts in the country, that doesn't seem like much money. In my district, where the average household income is just over 50,000, we haven't quite reached 51 yet. That means they're making pretty good money, and yet we're not even looking at doing that. Now, I'm not saying we take that away 100% the first year. We got to take a look at that. That's what needs to be negotiated. But that was never part of your bill. That was in my jurisdiction. Isn't that correct?
That is correct. And to the gentleman's point, go back, a totally separate bill, but you'll remember toward the end of last year, we were working hard. A lot of our fellow Americans were hurting from hurricanes. We're doing a disaster relief bill. The Appropriations Committee did a little over 100 pages and spent about $100 billion, I think 110, because we added 10 billion for ag.
I don't know what Tom Cole's talking about, and I don't know what Morgan Griffith's talking about. I didn't catch enough of that, but it's interesting. In Morgan Griffith's district, there are rural hospitals closing. So this is a very interesting discussion. And, frankly, I mean, the Republican Party in the House really just doesn't have a health care plan. And they always profess to care about low income people, this and that, their constituents, but really when it comes down to it, nothing ever comes out of them in terms of policy. It's just talking, and then nothing ever comes out of them in terms of policy. So I don't know what Morgan Griffith is talking about up there. I don't know how much longer this is going. It can't go on too much longer because the last Democrat has spoken, and I can't imagine the last Republican's not coming up pretty soon. So this is the Rules Committee in the House. Basically, this committee decides what is going to be voted on the House floor exactly and what amendments might be considered or not. What is expected to happen is that the Democrats going to lose this argument. They don't have the votes to carry on with what they want to do with amendments. And this is expected to pass. The government is expected to reopen when it does pass on the House floor. And the Republicans will be able to argue that, hey, we reopened the government, you know. And I think one of the big pressure points here is air traffic controllers. There's been a lot of scary stories coming out of airports that would indicate that there's something up in terms of the danger of not paying certain government folks that do really important jobs. And that's getting scary. And I think that this bill will pass tomorrow. It's expected to pass. But of course, until it passes, nobody really knows what is going to happen. Okay, so you cannot really know anything until that bill hits the floor and it actually passes. There is some obvious conversation here about from these Republicans talking about things that they don't like about the bill. And there's one big glaring thing in the bill that was stuck in there. And I did appreciate the comments with regard to Chuck Schumer knowing about it and all this other stuff, which I don't know how he wouldn't have known about it. At any rate, there's a provision in the bill effectively that pays people out you know, on a completely separate matter, $500,000 per person and more. That's a really controversial piece that even the Republicans are bringing up as highly problematic. You know that when the Republicans bring something up as highly problematic, it must be really problematic. So anyway, Austin Scott from Georgia, who's a Republican, brought up that provision and is not happy about it at all. And I suspect it won't necessarily mean anything. He probably will vote for the bill anyway because he made the point himself in his conversation that if they change the bill on the House side, they have to send it back to the Senate side. Frankly, I don't know why that's a problem because Thanksgiving is the week after, but I doubt that they're going to do anything. They're probably not going to send the bill back. I mean, this is just how it goes. The government is, the Congress is absolutely dysfunctional, and it is very likely that this thing is going to pass tomorrow night at some point. The first step is going through the Rules Committee, and let's listen to a little bit more of Morgan Griffith. Again, Morgan Griffith from Virginia, the southwest tip of Virginia, Tennessee.
And while some people say it wasn't clean, and technically it had some other stuff in it, but none of it was stuff the Democrats opposed. Telemedicine, federal qualified health centers. I mean, there was some good stuff in there that belonged in an appropriations style bill. And it's all in here, is it not, Mr. Chairman? All of that stuff we had in the original CR is still in here.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, as far as those programs are concerned. And yet, because some folks wanted to make it all about health insurance, which was not what this bill was about, was it?
No, sir.
And didn't actually want to deal with resolving the issue in a responsible legislative manner, working through the proper committees. We've been shut down for 40 days, and that then ties my hands tonight. I can't vote for amendments that I might otherwise think are appropriate, and I can't vote for amendments that I think are not only appropriate, but are truly justified, not just marginally, but by 2/3. I cannot vote for them because I want to get this shutdown over. There are too many things being impacted in my district, and I'm sure in other districts too. I can only speak to my district, but having one of the most economically challenged districts in the country, I heard somebody say something about suffering. I'm just going to tell you, I looked it up, and that individual said we had to have a little suffering. They're like 29th. I'm 409th out of 435 on household income. I got enough suffering without the federal government adding to it. So I will be voting no on all the amendments, and yes, to get this thing across the finish line.
But the gentleman yield,
I will
1
yield-
second.
I will yield to.
One second, which is this. You made a stat. I want to make sure everybody understands. You talked about that 15%, a number that you said was an historic number
It's over the decades. It's roughly.
as it relates to enrollees who don't file a claim, right?
That's
So
correct.
about 15%. That is for private plans, but that was also the number, give or take a percentage point, for Obamacare plans prior to the COVID subsidies, when they then bumped from 15 to now 35, 40%. Is that correct?
That is my understanding. And the other thing that drives me crazy, I would say to the gentleman is that everybody talks about these subsidies, and a lot of my folks are afraid that their basic Obamacare ACA subsidies going away. That was never threatened. That was never in question. The only thing that's in question is the emergency program that was put in for a 5-year period that is the enhanced premium tax credit, not your basic ACA subsidies, the enhanced premium tax credit. With that, Madam Chair, I yield back.
Thank you. Mr. Jack, you're recognized.
Thank you, Chairwoman. And as the last thing between this panel and the amendment panel, I recognize that I will be brief. But I will say just from the outset, first, I want to commend my colleagues' comments, and I want to commend the chairman's testimony. I also want to note, I'm proud that Congressman Langworthy noted that it is Veterans Day, and I want to note from the outset we have 79 veterans serving in the House, Republicans and Democrats, some of whom are in the room. We thank you for your service, and we thank the millions of Americans who served in our uniform for your service on this important day. Chairman, in closing, if you could just tie everything together from this hearing, the vote tomorrow, it's a binary choice to open the government or to prolong the shutdown. And we've talked a lot about what this bill actually does, and we've heard the other side comments on what they think it does. I want to give you a chance to close out and remind everybody what this bill principally does tomorrow.
Well, thank you very much for the question, and I appreciate the attitude. And honestly, I won't say tonight's hearing made me miss the Rules Committee, but it does remind me how.
They're going to go to amendments. I can see Eugene Vinman sitting in the back there from Virginia, very Virginia night here in the Rules Committee. He must have an amendment that he's going to speak to. I am going to re-rack the video and go to an interview of Hakeem Jeffries on MSNBC. And then I'll get back to the Rules Committee. Yeah, so it is interesting that what we see on the screen is the end of the discussion on the CR. This is really the bigger discussion. Then you get to amendments, and once again, all these amendments are expected to be voted down. I'd be surprised if any of them make it past a certain point. They're very unlikely to. I mean, there's no way any of the amendments are going to make it. You just never know what can happen. But that's generally not going to happen. And but they have to have the discussion. So this discussion is probably going to go into 10, 11 o'clock at night. This is Lauren Burke. This is Lauren live at 9. And amazing how hard it is for people to get health care in this country, affordable health care, but how easy it is to send $40 billion to Argentina. It's really an amazing thing. That's a talking point that I think that the Democratic Party needs to say over and over again, that whole talking point about the money going to Argentina. I'm going to switch the tabs and then I'll go back to the Rules Committee after I listen to this conversation between Chris Hayes and Hakeem Jeffries. I'm just going to rack this up. But yeah, I mean, it's just amazing. The $40 billion going to Argentina is one of the most incredible things in the world. This interview was probably about 20 or 30 minutes ago. And, hey, it's amazing what the Congress can do when it feels like it, and when it doesn't feel like it, what they don't do, and that involves millions and millions of people. At any rate, this is Hakeem Jeffries with Chris Hayes.
Hakeem Jeffries from New York's 8th Congressional District. Congressman, you will be back in session tomorrow. Mike Johnson has decided that he's going to call the House back into session. How will leadership be whipping votes on this vote to basically pass what the Senate passed, continuing funding to the government through January at current levels, and reopen the government?
Well, House Democrats will strongly oppose the bill that's come over from the Senate because we continue to make clear that we have to decisively address the Republican healthcare crisis. I'm thankful that Republicans have finally decided to end their 7+ week taxpayer-funded vacation, which was outrageous. They've been on the run, but they can no longer hide. And in just a few moments from now, myself and Catherine Clark will offer an amendment before the Rules Committee to change the bill so that it extends the Affordable Care Act tax credits for 3 years.
And that amendment, of course, he is going to talk live in the Rules Committee. That amendment, of course, is likely to fail. They're trying to force them. What the Democrats are doing is really trying to force the Republicans into a conversation where they are talking about how they're against health care. And that's what's going to happen, because none of these amendments are going to make it to the floor. None of these amendments are going to be voted on. So the moment that it sort of plays out for this bill is in this Rules Committee, which is funny because it doesn't really play out on, it plays out on the floor, but you know what the result is going to be. And so the really interesting arguments a lot of times happens in rules. At any rate, what they're doing, what Democrats doing, is forcing the Republicans to discuss over and over again how they are against health care.
And we're going to put Republicans on record. They've been saying, many of them, for the last several weeks, that they actually do want to deal with this healthcare crisis situation. The fact that for tens of millions of people, their premiums, copays, and deductibles are about to skyrocket. These are working class Americans. But now we're going to force them to actually see, are they willing to do it, or will they continue to do the bidding of Donald J. Trump?
How did you hear about the Senate deal?
I think I learned about the Senate deal maybe an hour or two before it officially came together.
Wow, that's a question I was dying to ask Jeffries yesterday. I'm glad Chris Hayes asked that.
And certainly, I think there's a lot of disappointment as it relates to what those 7 or 8 Senate Democrats decided to do. I am thankful for what we've seen from Leader Schumer and the overwhelming majority of Senate Democrats who for 7+ weeks held the line and continued to stand against this Republican spending bill, because as we've indicated, we were not going to support anything that guts the health care of the American people.
Now, that's an interesting answer. I suspect Hayes is going to follow up with something like, do you support Schumer? Of course, Jeffries right now is really good at deflecting away from the Schumer question. So let's see what happens next.
And as you've indicated also as well, Chris, over the last several weeks, we have elevated successfully the issue of the Republican health care crisis, and we're not backing away from it. We're going to press them tonight. We're going to press them on the House floor tomorrow, and we're going to continue to press them until these Affordable Care Act tax credits are extended.
I want to ask one more question just about the deal and how it came together. So, you know, legislative leaders like yourself, Senator Schumer, you're not people's boss, right? I mean, everyone's elected. They get to vote their conscience. You try to whip them, but they get to do what they want to do. But is it not an indictment of the minority leaders' leadership in the Senate if it's the fact that on something so high stakes and so high leverage, there's basically a breakaway caucus that hammers the deal out?
Now, that's an easy one for Jeffries to answer.
Well, it was my understanding that this was a somewhat rogue group of individuals in terms of how they approached this negotiation. And they broke away from the overwhelming majority of their colleagues, both progressive senators and moderate senators. And, that's unfortunate, but they're going to have to explain themselves. I think our fight right now, Chris, is the reality that there are at least 25 different Republicans who in different ways in the House have been on record saying that we have to address this healthcare crisis because it's out of control. And we know the cost of living in this country is out of control. And Republicans, these people, these extremists, they lied to the American people. They said they were going to lower costs on day one.
He pivoted back to the Republicans, which is really the only thing he can do, because talking about the leadership in the Senate, of course, is always a loser.
But costs haven't gone down. They've gone up. Housing costs through the roof, grocery costs through the roof, utility bills, electricity prices through the roof. And now, because of their refusal to extend the Affordable Care Act tax credits, some instances we know that everyday Americans are going to experience insurance costs that increase by $1,000 or $2,000 per month. That is unsustainable. That's why we're in this fight, Chris, until we win this fight for the American people.
So I don't know if people quite have gotten their head around this. The bill that's going to be before the House that passed the Senate will extend funding through January. We're in the second week of November. That'll be here before you know it.
Right.
So Laura Ingraham interviewed Donald Trump and asked basically, well, what's going to happen in January? I want to play you what he had to say.
Exactly.
How do Republicans avoid this shutdown saga from reoccurring on January 30th when this deal ends?
Well, we're trying to put in a bill, as you know, the bill or a bill that you can never do that again. You can't just shut down the government because you're trying to renegotiate a deal.
I don't think that's in the bill, and I don't think you could even, do you even understand what he's talking about?
No.
No, I have no idea what he's saying, and I don't think Donald Trump has any idea what he's saying either. But here's what I do know is that the Affordable Care Act tax credits are going to expire on December 31st.
Right.
And so the Republicans are not going to be able to run away from this issue. We're in open enrollment right now. Tens of millions of people are seeing the reality that their premiums, copays, and deductibles are about to skyrocket. People are not going to be able to afford to go see a doctor when they need one. So this has been a very real fight for us as Democrats. And this affordability fight is going to continue. It's the reason why great candidates, my colleague, Mikey Sherrill, won a decisive victory in New Jersey and Abigail. We won in New York. We won in Pennsylvania. We won in Georgia. We won in Mississippi. We won in California. That's the momentum that will allow us to continue to stay in the fight, to lower the high cost of living, fix our broken healthcare system, clean up the corruption mess that Donald Trump and Republicans have created, and then go back and take control of the House of Representatives next November so we can start the process, Chris, of ending this national nightmare.
So, so he of course smartly goes back to Tuesday, the big triumph that the Democrats had on November 4, which of course they stepped on their own messaging, which the Democrats are really good at doing. They're really good at all of a sudden everything's great. And now, okay, let's step on it with something negative, with like this shutdown deal that came out of nowhere.
What do you say to people who, and I've seen a lot of people say this, that yes, Democrats won everywhere, coast to coast, small, swing counties and statewide elections, and they won because they were fighting. And then once they won, they stopped fighting. Why did they do that?
Well, that's a question really that the 8 or so Democrats in the Senate are going to have to answer. I can tell you that House Democrats are committed to fighting on all the things, fighting to make sure we push back against the extremism that Donald Trump has unleashed on the American people, fighting to make sure that we actually improve the quality of life of everyday Americans. We've said from the beginning, look, we want to find a bipartisan spending agreement approach that actually makes life better for working class Americans, that lowers the high cost of living, that improves their quality of life, that addresses the Republican healthcare crisis. These are reasonable things, but Republicans refuse to do anything about it. Why? Because these people, these extremists, they're only concerned with making life better for the wealthy, the well-off, and the well-connected. That's what their one big ugly bill was all about. They can't find a dime to extend the Affordable Care Act tax credits for everyday Americans, middle-class Americans, and working-class Americans. But somehow, in the midst of this shutdown, they found $40 billion to bail out their right-wing dictator friend in Argentina. It's
Boom.
extraordinary.
So, that $40 billion talking point, they should be hammering that in every conversation. It comes in late. So let's go back to rules, because Hakeem Jeffries is in rules now. So let's listen to that.
So Whip Clark and myself, on behalf of the House Democratic Caucus, believe that this amendment to extend the Affordable Care Act tax credits for tens of millions of hardworking American taxpayers is actually designed to put the American people first.
This is live.
And we're hopeful that our Republican colleagues will join us and abandon the reckless policies that you all have pursued in creating this Republican healthcare crisis, including but not limited to what Republicans did in your one big ugly bill, largest cut to Medicaid in American history, ripping health insurance away from at least 14 million people. Hospitals, nursing homes, and community-based health clinics all across the country, including in rural America, are closing because of Republican policies. And now, because of the refusal to extend the Affordable Care Act tax credits, tens of millions of people are going to suffer, will be unable to see a doctor when they need one in every single community in this country. And so we respectfully urge all of our colleagues to support this amendment to extend the Affordable Care Act tax credits and support the American people. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Jeffries. Ms. Clark, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Ranking Member McGovern, members of the committee. Thank you for having us. I am proud to co-sponsor Leader Jeffries' amendment.
Her mic is
to
off, but
be
okay.
here this year, this urgent lifeline for the American people. To my Republican colleagues, welcome back. I don't know what you've been doing the last 54 days, but I hope you've spent some of that time talking to your neighbors, hearing from your constituents.
Good staff.
And I hope you've heard the same stories that they have been conveying to us. I hope you realize just how anxious they are, how desperate they are as they scramble to figure out how they are going to afford health care under this Republican budget. And I hope you got a chance to hear from the people who traveled to the United States Capitol trying to secure meetings with their Republican members of Congress. Americans like the farmer I met, Ann from Minnesota. She's a soybean farmer, already suffering from the market disaster caused by Republican tariffs. Then she found out her local hospital was closing because of the Medicaid cuts in your budget. And now you're going after her ACA coverage. And by the way, 1 in 4 out of our farmers get their health care coverage through the ACA. You have sent her premiums skyrocketing, and I have heard this same story from small business owners, from gig workers, from parents, from people who live in your states. So what are we doing here today? You've already voted to dismantle Medicaid, the largest healthcare program in America, a program that covers 40% of all births in this country, 40% of children in this country, 40% of disabled people in this country. But you couldn't leave it there. Now you're going after the millions of families who get their coverage under the Affordable Care Act. And let's be clear about what that actually means, specifically to your own constituents. Let's take a couple making $88,000 a year. In each of your districts, that couple currently pays for Silver Plan $623 a month. It is by no means cheap. But here's what that couple will pay in 2026 if you vote yes on this budget. In Pendleton, New York, this couple will go from paying $623 to $1,160 per month. In Tifton, Georgia, they will pay $2,134 a month. In Greensboro, North Carolina, they will pay $2,300. In Rock Hill, South Carolina, they will pay $2,600. And in Fredericksburg, Texas, this middle-class couple will pay $3,000 every single month to get themselves some halfway decent health insurance. This budget will raise costs on people who voted for Donald Trump, people who believed him, who believed their Republican members of Congress when they promised to lower their cost of living. And instead, they're being asked to spend up to $3,000 a month for ACA coverage. That's $36,000 a year before their deductible, before their copays. What a betrayal of a straightforward promise. But this is not a given. This does not have to happen to the American people. This is a choice. Democrats have been presenting off-ramps all year. We've been giving you a chance to reverse course day after day. Well, here's another. Here's another chance to do right by the people you represent, who believe in you and voted for you. I urge you, for the sake of the American people, to make Leader Jeffries' amendment extending the ACA tax credit for 3 years in order and bring it to the House floor for a vote. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to defer my questions until the end when I see how many things need to be corrected that are being said. Mr. McGovern,
Well, I
I'll
need-
recognize.
Well, I need to correct the record for some things that have been said, Madam Chair, with all due respect. First of all, with regard to the claims that my Republican friends can't vote for any amendments because somehow that will mean that the government shutdown will be prolonged. The Senate basically took a day and a half for them to do what they did. If we were to pass any, make any amendments in order in the Rules Committee, like getting rid of that slush fund for certain senators, the Senate Majority Leader Thune could call them back tonight. They say, be ready to vote tomorrow night. They could take care of that right away. So that's number one. Number two, my friends keep on talking about a democratic shutdown. I want, in case anyone's watching here, I want to make this very, very clear. And I'm going to make it clear to my Republican friends, you control everything. You control the White House, you control the House, you control the Senate. So Democrats did not shut the government down. Republicans did by refusing to negotiate. And the third thing I want to correct for the record is I got to be honest, I am shocked by the indifference that my Republican friends are showing towards the impact of not extending the ACA tax credits. It is stunning to me. I don't know whether you don't talk to your constituents, but if you do, people are getting bills where their premiums are skyrocketing. I mean, it's astronomical. And you knew about this well before the shutdown. You chose to do nothing. You chose to do nothing. You knew about it during the shutdown. You chose to do nothing, not even to want to sit down and negotiate. And now you know about it. I'm going to tell you right now, you refuse to act. You own this. You own this. And it's a cruel thing to do to the American people. Leader Jeffries, I want to get to the substance of your amendment, which I think is so important. But first, I want to ask you about something one of our Republican colleagues said in this hearing room just before you came in here. Earlier, I asked Chairman Cole a simple question. I said, do you think the House should have been here these last 8 weeks trying to pass appropriation bills? Because as you know, as appropriations chair, he still has not passed 9 out of 12 bills that need to pass by the end of the fiscal year, which was in September, by the way, to keep the government funding. So I pointed that out. And he gave this long, meandering non-answer. And he said something that stood out to me as odd. And it kind of shocked me, to be honest. And I went back and I looked at the transcript, and he said it was okay that we weren't here because, quote, there wasn't anything for us to do until the Senate acted, end quote. And I got to tell you, I'm shocked by that Republicans would say there wasn't anything for us to do. And can you talk about what the House should have been doing for the last 8 weeks on affordability, on health care, on grocery prices, on rent, on what looks like a war that might occur in the Caribbean, on the many things that people are looking for us to take action on? What would Democrats have done if we were in charge here?
Well, I thank the distinguished gentleman from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and it's an incredible question. It was a stunning answer. Given all of the problems that the American people are confronting right now, throughout the country, beginning with the affordability crisis, the cost of living in America is far too high. The American people throughout the country just made that clear last Tuesday across the country that they want to see action. Yet, for 7+ weeks, House Republicans saw fit to be on a taxpayer-funded vacation, missing in action, part of the witness protection program, doing nothing to make life better for the American people. That's extraordinary. And you got to wonder whether this was an order that was given by Donald Trump, who apparently has said that he's got 2 jobs. He's both the president and the Speaker of the House. His words, not mine. Donald Trump apparently doesn't believe that there's an affordability crisis. Said it himself. There is no affordability crisis in the United States of America. That's what Donald Trump, top Republican in this country, says. So I guess it's no small wonder that the Republican chairman of the Appropriations Committee would say that there's nothing to do. because Republicans apparently don't think that there are problems in this country that should be dealt with, such that the House of Representatives should be in session. But as Democrats, our view is that we've got to lower the high cost of living. We've got to make life more affordable for everyday Americans who are suffering under crushing Republican policies. Costs haven't gone down. That was the day one promise. Costs have gone up. Inflation going in the wrong direction. Far too many people across this country working hard, playing by the rules, but cannot get ahead, are barely getting by, can't thrive, and can barely survive. This is in America, the wealthiest country in the history of the world. And Republicans have been out since September 19th. That's extraordinary. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done. Apparently, House Democrats are the only ones committed on a day-to-day, week-to-week, month-to-month basis to do the people's business. And our commitment remains to lower the high cost of living, to fix our broken healthcare system, starting by extending the Affordable Care Act tax credits to prevent tens of millions of people from experiencing unaffordable healthcare premiums skyrocketing through the roof that will either lead to medical bankruptcy or prevent them from being able to go see a doctor when they need one.
If I could go back to the issue of healthcare, just for the record, I mean, has Speaker Johnson promised a vote to extend the ACA tax credits to either of you?
It's extraordinary that he hasn't indicated that there will be a vote to address the Republican health care crisis. Now, our colleague from the great state of Georgia, Marjorie Taylor Greene, found it laughable that there's a Republican health care plan. She said she couldn't find it. She can't find it because it doesn't exist. Now, we know what the plan has been in the past. In terms of the Affordable Care Act, Republicans have tried to repeal it more than 70 times over the last 15 years. And so we are just trying to get our Republican colleagues to take yes for an answer. We've said repeatedly, let's find a bipartisan path forward. Let's reopen the government. Let's make life better for the American people. But let's address the healthcare crisis that our Republican colleagues have created, and we can start by extending the Affordable Care Act tax credits.
Has he talked to any of you about a pathway forward? I mean, has he engaged either of you on our leadership about how we might resolve this healthcare crisis?
Absolutely not. And it is astounding when we have 60% of American families telling us they have a hard time affording the basics for their families. This is about lowering people's costs, whether that's housing, groceries, utility bills, and affording health care. This should be something that Republicans should have come and negotiated with us, but they wouldn't do that. They showed so little regard for the American people. Not only did they make this extreme bargain where they took away their health care, Medicare, Medicaid, the ACA tax subsidies, medical research, all to pay for permanent tax cuts for the very wealthiest Americans. They couldn't even, while they were home, not doing their jobs, swear in a duly elected member of Congress because they would rather not do that than actually have to talk about the fact that they are shielding those in the Epstein files. The outrages and the disdain and arrogance that they look at the American people with is truly hard to take in.
I mean, I took the train down here today, and I got an earful from a lot of people on the train. And they're quite frankly puzzled at like the priorities of Washington right now. They don't understand, why billionaires and millionaires get tax cuts and the ACA tax credits can't be extended so that working families can afford their health care. They don't understand Donald Trump's obsession with redoing his bathroom in marble and gold and building a Marie Antoinette, ballroom and demolishing the East Wing while they're struggling to afford groceries. I mean, well, bottom line is the president won't even acknowledge that food prices are going up. When's the last time he's ever been in a grocery store? He has no clue what he's talking about. You got to talk to real people. But there is a disconnect, and people are furious. And by the way, this is not about Democrat versus Republican or left versus right. This is now about top versus bottom. I mean, and people increasingly feel like they do not have a voice down here, that the leadership in this Congress and this White House, all they care about are people who are well off and well connected, who can write out big checks and who can help enrich, the president, his family, and those around him. And, that's corruption. That is corruption. I used to say during his first term that Donald Trump is the most corrupt U.S. president in recent history. This time around, I want to amend that statement to take out the word recent. This is unconscionable what's going on. And we ought to be able to come together and make sure people don't get screwed over on their health care. I thank you and I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. McGovern. Mr. Roy, you're recognized.
Notice the ranking member says that, quote, we own this.
You do.
If we don't go down the road that is being suggested here before us, when in fact, the current situation with respect to healthcare exists entirely by record of vote and record of policies as a result of my Democrat colleagues putting forward the policies that the American people are having to live under. Entirely. They broke the system, and then they come here saying that we own it if we don't throw more subsidies, pour more diesel on the fire to the fire that they started. That's what's happening right now. That's what for the American people to understand. Insurance companies.
Bail out Argentina.
Insurance companies, 1,032% stock prices up since 2010. 448% up from 2013. 85% of the revenues for insurers come from the federal government. What my Democratic colleagues are proposing is an insurance company enrichment scheme. It's literally what they're doing, is printing money in the Treasury and giving it to insurance companies. That's their solution for healthcare. Enriching insurance companies that are the very people that are telling the American people which care they can get and not get. There's no chance for an American to go to the doctor of his or her choice. There's no chance for them to go get care. There was no chance for my constituent who lives near Fredericksburg, Texas, to go to MD Anderson to get care because she's on Obamacare, which can't go to MD Anderson. And if the cancer that I had when I went to MD Anderson came back and I'm on Obamacare as a member of Congress, I couldn't go to MD Anderson because of the situation that my Democratic colleagues have put the American people in. Going around and preening that you're somehow caring for people more by giving them coverage for care that doesn't actually provide them care. While insurance companies get rich. $35 billion in subsidies in 2024 for people who didn't even use their plan. It's absolutely unconscionable. That is right. That is the correct word. It is unconscionable what we have done to the healthcare system, destroying it for the American people so that they can't get the care of their choice. That's what's happened. And now you hold the government hostage for 45 days and then try to come lecture Republicans about it when you've been holding the American people hostage to a broken healthcare system for 15 years. That's what's been going on. The fact is, Madam Chairman or Chairwoman, we are here today trying to proceed with, I think, reason.
So Gary in the chat, I need you to wake up and stop watching Fox News, okay? And I know that Fox News is very compelling. They like to make everybody believe that everybody who's undocumented in the country is on our healthcare system. They're not on our healthcare system because you can't. When you sign up, you have to verify. So, I mean, you don't just get on the American healthcare system. It doesn't work that way. And I know Fox News likes to say it over and over again, and all the people on the right like to say it over and over again so they can get everybody mad at immigrants because that's their whole big strategy politically, but it's just not true. Problem is, it's not true. It's called misinformation and disinformation. And, you know, the bigger problem is that we have too many people in this country who are uninsured. They're not in the system. And unlike so many other industrialized nations that have a healthcare system to cover their citizens of their country to make their lives easier, we don't have that in the United States. But, you know, there's a thing going on in the Republican Party where everything is about hating immigrants, going after immigrants, vilifying immigrants. You see the videos of ICE grabbing people in the streets and daycare centers and outside of schools and separating their people's children from them and grabbing them and breaking car windows. And you see all the videos. And you should ask yourself the question, is this the way a civilized country that has a constitution and due process, is this the way that country operates? Apparently the answer is yes. So Gary, stop watching Fox News. Watch a few other things. Watch some things that aren't political to the right or the left. That's the thing. You know, watch something other than what Fox says every single night, because they omit a lot. Let's get back to the Rules Committee and our friends in rules.
But couldn't see fit to ask us a single question, engage in a debate. Where y'all been, bro? You've been out for 7 weeks. You don't have the time to have a back and forth? We hear you rant for a few minutes, basically threaten to repeal the Affordable Care Act and then don't want to defend that position? You should feel free to defend that position. You've done it 70 times. And if you think that's on the right side of the American people, then fine. That's your plan. Repeal and displace tens of millions of people. That's the Republican plan. And what I don't understand is why my colleague cut and run. I'm sitting right here. Catherine Clark is right here. Hopefully, Madam Chair, we can have a back and forth as opposed to just being lectured to by our Republican colleagues. But I thank the distinguished gentlelady from the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, who, by the way, another decisive win for the American people in Pennsylvania. Last Tuesday, it was extraordinary rebuke of the extremism that we've seen from our Republican colleagues and the absence of any plan to make life better for everyday Americans.
And of course, he's talking about Chip Roy. Chip Roy likes to yell and say stuff and rant and rave and then run out of the room, apparently.
In the House over the last few months. I mean, the Senate's taken some votes on tariffs. Maybe we could have done something with respect to tariffs here. Except I think we have a rule that would prevent us from doing votes on tariffs.
Yeah, I thank the gentlelady for raising the tariff issue, because there's so many parts of the parade of horribles that Republicans have unleashed on everyday Americans that I neglected to actually mention the tariffs. The Trump tariffs are causing costs on everyday Americans to increase by thousands of dollars per year. This is an affirmative effort to make life more expensive for the American people. My colleague from Texas, before he cut and run, he also said that, you know, we have a fiscally irresponsible situation in this country, and that because Democrats want to extend the Affordable Care Act tax credits for everyday Americans, working class Americans, and middle class Americans, somehow that's problematic. You know what's problematic? The fact that Republicans, with the one big ugly bill, enacted the largest cut to Medicaid in American history, ripped health care away from millions of folks. In that same piece of legislation, cut $186 billion from SNAP, the largest cut to nutritional assistance in American history, literally stole food from the mouths of hungry children, seniors, and veterans. And all of that was done to enact massive permanent tax breaks for GOP billionaire donors. And in the process, as if that wasn't bad enough, skyrocketed the debt by trillions of dollars more per year, saddling our children and our grandchildren, and making it more complicated for them to experience the American dream in their future. So we are not going to be lectured by anyone on the other side of the aisle about fiscal responsibility when the bill that you just passed jammed down the throats of the American people in a partisan way because Donald Trump ordered you to do it, is the most fiscally irresponsible piece of legislation ever in this country's history.
Thank you.
And that's the House Democratic leader, Hakeem Jeffries. Yeah, so Gary, feel free to drop into the chat any evidence you may have of what you're saying, which of course is not going to happen because there is no evidence of what you're saying. There's not 60 million people who are undocumented in this country over the last 5 years. I don't know where you're getting this stuff from, but like I said, if you've got evidence, hey, I'm open to seeing it. Drop the link in the chat. Feel free to do that anytime. Again, I know that's not happening because there is no evidence. Not to say that people in this country right now, we're in an era of lying and disinformation and defamation, and actually that's going to probably be the next show. I've got a situation where there was the issue of journalism and truth and accuracy came up in a tit for tat between Roland Martin and Charlemagne the God. Two really good, smart guys, as a matter of fact, but they had a disagreement over something. And Roland Martin's response really got into the issue of journalism, truth, and facts. And so the next show, I think tomorrow night, will be on those topics. I almost feel like doing it tonight. Because that's something I've had to deal with mainstream media, specifically the Washington Post and the New York Times, with two platforms that sometimes care about facts and other times don't care about facts and want to do politics instead of journalism. At any rate, I'm a big fact document gal, Gary. I'm one of those people who really likes facts and documents. And when you say that 60 million people are on our healthcare system in the United States who are not legal in this country, there's got to be some evidence of that someplace, right? So feel free to enlighten everybody, Gary. Feel free to tell us and inform us of what you're talking about.
Special needs, who needs a lot of care, but who she is committed to keeping at home and being with people that he loves. Without Medicaid, she cannot care for him. He is a very medically complicated person, and she is so afraid of what is going to happen. And she, 29 years old, is also a small business owner while caring for her brother full time. ACA is what gets her health insurance coverage. This plan, and let's not sell the Republicans short, they had a plan. Their plan was to come in, take $1 trillion out of Medicaid, trigger a $500 billion cut to Medicare, take away the ACA tax subsidies, and then cut medical research. So while we take it away from people in the immediate and now, we are also saying to the future, good luck. As one researcher who recently lost her lab due to federal funding cuts under the big ugly bill said to me, all the hopes of the patients I've been working with are now in a freezer. Now in a freezer. She said, I'll be okay. I'll be able to relocate, probably to Europe, to be able to continue her research. But that plan that they have is to take all of that funding and give it to the very wealthiest Americans in a permanent tax break. And they couldn't wait to get us back here. We had to come back on July 3rd to make sure that we did that in time. But we've sat here for 54 days without a single hearing, a single negotiation, a single offer, and the one most moderate of proposals to have a one-year extension and a bipartisan commission to look at ways we can work on this system and make healthcare work for people, rejected. out of hand and no comment. And I just want to say that it's a little hard to be lectured to about the pain that is being inflicted on the American people when we have heard nothing from our Republican colleagues as this administration saw their shutdown as an opportunity to fire another additional 4,000 plus federal workers to the 200,000 they have already let go, to threaten furloughed federal workers they might not get their pay after this shutdown concludes. Where was the outrage? And going on and lecturing our air traffic controllers that somehow they're not patriotic enough to be working without pay. And then we just go through the parade of horribles on the split screen. People so concerned. Their spouse may not be able to have the cancer treatment continue they need. They may not be able to manage their diabetes, get that inhaler that their child needs, and the continuing medical care to survive. And nothing as the president takes down the East Wing to build a ballroom, hosts a Great Gatsby party with a burlesque show thrown in, $40 billion to bail out Argentina. And then we get to SNAP, where this president and the loyalists in Congress sat on their hands and made up excuses. Well, they took food away from hungry kids, seniors, veterans, disabled people, and said, we legally can't give this out. They knew that was not true then, and they have taken it all the way to the Supreme Court in order not to feed hungry kids. It went from let them eat cake to let them eat nothing. How dare you lecture us when you are willing to let hunger in this country be a political weapon?
Thank you. I will yield back.
Yeah, that was interesting. So,
Mr. Scott.
Austin Scott.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And would you agree with me that the gross premium is set by the insurance carrier and doesn't have anything to do with the subsidy?
Who are you asking that question to?
Either one of you.
Gross
Premium.
What I'll say is that tens of millions of Americans are at risk right now of their premiums, copays, and deductibles dramatically increasing because of the Republican refusal to extend the Affordable Care Act tax credits. And these are people all across the country. In fact, in the 10 states that would be most impacted by the Republican refusal to extend the Affordable Care Act tax credits, all 10 of them are run by Republicans.
Okay, this is probably a good time to bounce because it's almost 10 o'clock Eastern. Austin Scott, this member right here from Georgia, the Republican, made a really good point earlier about a provision in the bill that allows for a private cause of action, otherwise known as a lawsuit, that allows certain members to collect $500,000 from the government on a grievance with regard to surveillance. Whether or not Republicans are going to vote against the bill over that is another story. I tend to doubt that that would be the case because that's just not how life works. At any rate, thanks everybody for joining. Please hit the like button. Even you, Gary, hit the like button. I'll be probably back tomorrow with a discussion around 9 o'clock about the media, state of the media and partisanship in the media, and the fact that the media is so interested in is more interested in clickbait than it is in actually telling the truth. That's really easy to identify on. I'm going to have some examples of that. You see them every day in clickbait and other things that we see in the media. You see them every day. And at any rate, there's a lot going on in the world. This bill will be on the floor tomorrow. Probably toward the end of the evening. I should say, I guess tomorrow's Wednesday. It'll probably be somewhere in that 6 and 7 o'clock hour that they're going to vote on this and reopen the government And the likelihood of the Democrats getting any of their amendments added to this bill is probably zero. But you never know until the vote happens. The margins in the House are very close. Incidentally, Repelec Grijalva is probably going to be sworn in tomorrow. So the question of the Epstein files is going to come up. I did notice that the discharge position process is a 3 and 4 day process to get the Epstein files open. They're going to have the votes to have that when Repelec Grijalva is sworn in. And that should happen tomorrow. And but it still takes a few days for that to play out. And I did notice a certain scheduling note in the House that they're not coming back after tomorrow's vote until November 21. That's interesting for a lot of reasons. Right up against Thanksgiving. They're clearly not wanting to be in session long enough to relieve that discharge petition related to the Epstein files. In fact, I might have a live on the Epstein file discharge petition process. Not a real long one, but something talking about that, because the Epstein files question is about to hit big time. And that we'll know more about tomorrow. It's freezing on the East Coast, by the way, in Northern Virginia, and I suspect in Washington, D.C., but I might brave the cold and go into the U.S. Capitol tomorrow and watch some of this up close. But at any rate, thanks everybody for watching. Thanks for hitting the like button. A lot happening, and I'll be back soon.